Welcome to episode 98 of the Nero Show. In today's episode,
there's a new entry into the all-road race bike category. We take a look through what it's proposing to do and how it fits in the market of road bikes.
The Northern Hemisphere race season's sort of dragging to an end. How should you make use of this part of the season?
There's a rider tossing up between a Pinarello Dogma and a Factor Ostro VAM. Rerun through the pros and cons of each bike and choose which one they should get.
And I'm talking about Run Club again because I'm obsessed with Run Club, all right? All right, let's get into it.
All right, Chris. I want to give all road bikes another go.
Ooh.
I want to start from the top because there's a new all road, which is the gravel hybrid bike release, which I want to chat through. I'm going to go through what the features are, what the bike is, what the pricing is, who's it for, and then see if I can convince myself or see if you can convince me that these all road bikes have a purpose. I want to just clean slate with a new release. Can I be sold an all road bike? And it's because of this new release, Ribble All-Road SLR. Road.cc did a video on it. So they got new 2024 Ribble All-Road range, first look. So there's three bikes in this new all-road range. There's the all-road e-bike. They've got the SL, which is their sort of entry-level version. The one we're going to be looking at that is most interests me is the Ribble All-Road SLR. It kind of whet my appetite at the end because I looked at it and I thought, okay, they're still trying. It's a modern, new twist on the all-road bike. Is there something here that I'm not giving credit for and I want to go through it top to bottom?
When you say, so is this a reaction to the Vitus Venom thing that we got all antsy about that Bike Radar gave Bike of the Year 2 years ago?
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So Bike Radar gave that Vitus all-road bike of the year 2 years ago. I thought it was just ridiculous. Who the hell's going to buy this? Who's it for? It's pointless. 2 years on, Ribble have done their all-road bike. And I want to just go through it again, see if my opinions change. So this is it here, the all-road SLR. And it's basically a racy aerodynamic version of an all-road bike. So it's taking that really super sort of futuristic prototype-looking Ribble Ultra SLR, chunked out aero bike with the really thick handlebars, taking that silhouette, those design features, and making it into essentially a gravel/road bike. So geometry-wise, what are we working with? The key part is it is more relaxed than any race bike. So shorter reach, higher stack, longer wheelbase, so more easy to get on with, more of an endurance geometry. I've brought up a few comparison bikes so we can compare this to a couple of different models to see how it compares. So I've brought up here, I'll send you a screenshot of this from Geometry Geeks. We've got the Tarmac SL8, the Aero from Canyon, and then another endurance bike, the Giant Defy. So you can see here much more, let's say, easier to live with, more relaxed than the SL8 and the Aero. So the reach is 4 millimeters to a centimeter shorter than those two race bikes. And then the stack is 2 centimeters shorter and a centimeter shorter than the Aero. So just shorter, so you're more over the front end, and higher. So you're not as slammed and rocked over. Compared to the Giant Defy, it is not as relaxed as the Giant Defy. So it has about the same reach as the new Giant Defy, but the Giant Defy is almost a centimeter higher. It's not quite full-on endurance bike territory. It's definitely more relaxed. And as I said, wheelbase, longer wheelbase than the SL8 and the Aero, which will just essentially slow the handling down, but still not quite as long as the Giant Defy. So the Giant Defy is 2 centimeters longer in the wheelbase. So that affects how twitchy it is and how steady it is on descents. The interesting thing, though, is that they don't have a really slack seat tube angle. And so this doesn't affect the handling as much, but it affects your bike fit. So it's still got a steep seat tube angle, the same as the Tarmac and the same as the Aero. And then the Defy has a slacker, more endurance-style seat tube angle. So you've basically going to be able to get yourself in more of a road racing position, but with the bike having handling characteristics more of an endurance bike. What do you think about that?
That's the absolute key metric for me, because now I haven't ridden a quote unquote. Are we saying this is an endurance bike? Well, I suppose for the want of.
It's an endurance. It is an endurance bike. That's what they're calling it. It's basically an aero endurance bike. Yes.
Okay, so, Chapter 2 Coco, I was always kind of, my issue with this bike was that it wasn't one nor the other because it had the shapes of a performance orientated race bike, but the geometry was that higher stack, shorter reach. But it also had the setback on the seat angle, which I'll bring up some pictures of my seat post and my saddle at the time. I had to sort of I actually changed the saddle that I was riding to try and get it further over the actual bottom bracket. And so whilst I actually really liked what they were doing because they were putting some sort of design and performance orientation into a geometry style setup, it was falling down at the performance end of it. That ticks a box for me, that I can get myself into a position. Okay, we're in the conversation now.
Good. I agree. I mean, I like, for what they're trying to do, I think that this makes sense. The only thing is it does come with a seat post. It looks like it has a pretty big setback on it. That looks like probably a 20 mil setback in this photo. And I can't see if that is, it looks like it might even be a round seat post. Hard to tell from these photos.
The lower model definitely was round. I don't think this is. I'm pretty sure this is that counterfoil or whatever they call it.
That might hinder it because even if the seat tube's a bit steeper, if you've then got this big setback seat post on it, that might impact your bike fit. But I do like the fact that they're kind of going, okay, people still want to be upright, but don't want to be sitting miles behind the bottom bracket. So more of a modern style bike fit in the geometry. So that's the geometry. Tube profiles are fully aero. So same as that Ribble Ultra SLR.
It's definitely D-shaped.
Okay, it's a D-shape. Okay, so
D-shaped,
you may struggle to get a zero offset seat post if you are looking at this going, yep, I'm going to be able to get fully Pagachar over the bottom bracket. Something to look into, but I give them points for trying to get further forward. As I said, tube profiles all, deep fork, deep head tube, all looking pretty modern, and then those aero handlebars coming off the Ribble Ultra SLR, which is, if you're caring about aerodynamics, you want an aero tweaked frame, you'll be happy.
I don't think you can just blast through that. This to me, that is the key sort of component to this. Okay. This has got a lot of those hyperbike touches that Ribble are famous for. Those what's the term? What's the technology that they call with the handlebars, where it's like the reverse flow air thing that they do around the middle of the handlebars?
They're like wake generators or something like that.
I can't remember. Yeah, and then so that super the fork to down tube integration again is very, very aerodynamic. I mean, this pricked my ears up just purely because this looks on the tin. It looks like a friggin' flagship aero bike.
What else am I saying? So also you've got the integrated shaped bottle cages. So even the things like that, sort of like they have on the BMCs or the Propels. So maybe a watt or two there. So if you are into aero tubed looking bikes, you're going to be happy with this narrow head tube. Yeah, it's ticking most of the boxes in terms of aero bikes there. But what makes this as an all-road bike is it's got clearance for 38mm tires, which is the same tire clearance that the Giant Defy has. So we'll keep. I want to get into the tire clearance thing because I actually don't think that's enough. But let's hold off on that and we'll just keep running through the bike. It's got mudguard mounts as well. So, yep, if you want to run mudguards.
Nothing says a bike was built in the UK than it's got mudguard mounts. But go on.
Yep, so that's on there. It's got a full in-frame storage on the down tube. So it has a compartment. You take the thing off. In the Road CC video, they showed a video of the all the tools in a tool bag that's all tucked in there. So it's a wide down tube for aerodynamics. And then they've also just put a big storage shelf in there too. So yeah, for an all-road bike, you'd be happy with that, wouldn't you? Put your extras in there, put your spares in. That's interesting.
100%.
And then just finally on the spec, before we go into more details on it, the Road CC claimed 7.5 kilograms, so that would be without pedals, for the Dura Ace version with Zip 353 NSWs. Yeah, that's pretty... I think you'd be kind of happy with that, although you do have to pay for that. That's only going to come up as you go to the Ultegra version with Mavic wheels and you go down the line. That Ultegra version's 8.
Yes.
And then the 105 version's probably 8.3.
Yeah. I mean, that's an S5. That's an S5. They're not particularly light wheels, I'll add, even though they're only like 45 mil depth. Slap a set of CRCs on there, but CRWs, sorry. Yeah, okay. That's not a deal breaker as far as I'm concerned.
That's the bike. I hope I've explained sort of that well. So essentially, again, what is it? It is an out-and-out aero bike with a relaxed geometry, but still allows you to get over the bottom bracket in a more modern bike fit, a modern non-aggressive bike fit, and it has tire clearance for 38mm tires, which could take you on mild gravel. That's what we're being sold here. That's the package.
From the performance aspect, looking at it, what is a tick from me is, so we've got a fully integrated front bar and stem, but we've gone a little bit further than that.
It's actually not fully integrated. It's still separate, but it looks neat.
Yeah.
It's very modern.
Yes. So, what was my point? My point was that this bike should enable a rider to adopt a pretty fast position that will work for them over a longer period of time. So not like negatively setting their back or anything like that. Ultimately, so what I'm trying to get at is, because the struggle with the endurance space or any of this all-road space has always been, oh yes, it's nice, it's going to feel comfortable, but comfortable doesn't necessarily mean fast. And I think this might be at least trying to flick that switch and enable this to also be a fast bike whilst being comfortable. Does that make sense?
Benefit as well, you will have to use less spaces under the stem, which will be nice for a lot of people. Don't have to run 3-4 centimeters of spaces. You could be able to, more likely you can have just 1 or 2. So that's good. The problem is when you start saying, okay, well, it's an all-road bike, so they're selling this as you can use it for gravel. Is 38mm tire clearance enough for gravel? I'll let you answer that first. What have you got on your gravel bike?
No, well, the answer is no. I mean, okay, and this is where the regional stuff just comes out, because we don't have in New South Wales, in Sydney, we don't really have 38mm gravel that is around. It's going to be more technical than that, unless you could find some roads around Lithgow or something that are nice sort of sealed, or the Hunter Valley. Yeah, you could find some nice sealed, gravelled sort of styled roads there. But if you're doing a gravel event, it's going to include some stuff that's a bit too gnarly for this. Now, of a lot of the footage that I see of guys riding gravel in the UK, there's a lot of these like country lane type, there's the stuff with like a grassy verge in the middle of the kind of farm road, and for that particular circumstance, yeah, I can definitely see this fitting that bill. But for a metro gravel rider, which is a thing, the gravel that we have access to is too gnarly for this bike. Ultimately, I think in Melbourne that's different. Again, this is going to be too regional.
But I also think from what I'm seeing in the US, in the US gravel scene, everyone's, what's Dylan Johnson on? 50s. So even if you're just a recreational, even more tame gravel, you're still probably going to want to put on, what are people running? 42s? 45s? I mean, what is this? What have you got?
45s.
45s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
the problem is you're just immediately at a disadvantage. Like if we went on a gravel ride and you turned up with 38s, I would basically tell you to go home. It's like it's that, you know, we might do like a Wyong loop on the weekend, and I would just tell you not to bother because I was once that guy. I once did it on a specialized diverge, turned up with 38s, hated my life. So whilst my problem with this is the rhetoric around it is you should be doubling down here on this being the Fred Whitten bike for someone rather than it being the insert gravel event here that Chris doesn't know about.
That brings me to my next point. Okay, so if we say, like, realistically for actual gravel, you're just going to need a gravel bike that can take 50s or 45s at least. So, it's probably not doing that. So then it's what it really is then in reality is a road bike that you're going to be using most of the time. People are going to be buying this as a road bike. And then that comes into the question of, are they going to want a bike that has down tube storage, mudguard mounts? And even though, the 38mm tire clearance is fine because, you can still run your 32s, your 30s for your race, for your fast Cat 1 rider sort of thing, Cat 2 rider. But that person's probably going to be turned off by the other features, like the mudguard mounts, the storage, cage thing, and then the sort of slightly heavier weight that's going to come from a build. So then wouldn't that person just go and buy an actual Aero road bike? Or is there still something in this package that they go, I'm gonna pick the Ribble All Road over a Canyon Air Road?
Well, it comes back to me. That comes back to the geometry question. You know, if you are realistic, the geometry of this is going to be more superior to, and that's kind of why I wanted to try and get into that thing of not only is this geometry going to be more suitable for you, maybe this is actually going to be faster for you ultimately.
I'm saying for the person doesn't care, that could fit, geometrized could fit a regular Aero bike.
Oh, you get the Aero bike.
They probably want to get the Aero bike. Okay. And then so the person that doesn't fit the Aero bike and goes, you know what, I really want that more relaxed geometry.
We need to change that. We need to change the language.
Okay. What can we say?
We need a new word.
It's a hard one to figure because it's not relaxed.
No.
It's
So compliance overused because you could have said more compliant geometry, but then does that sort of throw it off as being too slack? Even if like slacker geometry, that sort of sends the wrong message. More endurance geometry, more fondo geometry. I don't know. We need a marketing expert on this.
Yeah. You call it like road race geometry versus crit geometry, perhaps. Okay, so you're a racer who wants a more aggressive position. You're going to go and get your Canyon Air Road. Okay. You're not quite that fast, so you want more of this, let's call it relaxed geometry, if we want to call it that. Is that rider likely going to want this full-on Aero style frame? Or would they then be looking and going, actually, I probably should just get a Giant Defy, which is going to be lighter, or even a Trek Madone, which is going to be lighter. Now, on the Trek Madone, you won't have the tire clearance, but we're kind of saying for the person that doesn't care about the tire clearance is only ever going to ride it on the road anyway. Wouldn't they be better off going more towards the do-it-all Aero climbing hybrid and get that package in at the low 7s as opposed to, the Ultegra version of this, which is going to be closer to 8 and have a more lively feel?
And the prices sort of match up, do they? Because, but you kind of, you set it out in the beginning when you said you're a racer. Well, that's kind of already then removing. I don't think that's ultimately the market here. They've already got a category of bike for that which I really like, by the way, that Ultra SLR.
Yep. Doesn't seem to really have.
No, I think it's just.
I mean, we are in Australia. But that's my point, right? So it's not for that person. So it's for a slower rider.
Can't use that word.
Well, I know we can't, but it is. Because it's the person that wants a more relaxed geometry, isn't really going to want to go and ride Matthew van der Poel's bike. So they look at the all-road platform. But isn't that rider is by nature going to benefit less from the aerodynamic features? And so they're giving up the liveliness and the enjoyment of a more lighter bike like a Defy or a Trek Madone to gain aero features which they're not going to benefit as much from because they're riding slower.
Mm.
I know people are going to say everyone benefits from aerodynamics. Okay.
And
but at a point,
there's
when you're
also,
averaging 26, 27 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, but I've heard the argument that if it takes you 9 hours to do the Fred Whitten challenge and it takes Jesse Coyle 6 hours, it's the person who takes 9 hours who benefits more from aerodynamics because they're out there longer.
Yeah, and that's a complete, absolute lack of any logics or analysis.
I like that.
If you do it at 5 kilometers an hour, it'll take you 48 hours. That's not how aerodynamics work.
Yeah. I mean, your point is completely valid, and it's one that we continue to loop around at, every sort of 3 or 4 months. Yep. But at least with this,
okay, yep,
I feel
I'm open. I'm trying to. Yes, yeah.
I'm trying to talk myself into it as well.
I'm open to being talked into it because I'm trying to think of who's the rider. Who is the rider? Okay,
well, at least with this, there seems to be some thought that's gone into this category of bike, and let's say that it is a category of bike, this all road. Okay, it's not a race bike because you're trying to compare it to a pro peloton race bike. I understand that because ultimately you're the consumer and you get to compare anything you want. But they're trying to create this category, and in a category that, for me, has just tried to be washed down gravel bikes, half-assed gravel bikes with slightly road geometry. At least with this, there is a clear definition that it is an aerodynamically focused road bike that has extra capabilities if you want. And I do think that rider, that particular rider, though I don't think we can sit here and point our finger at that exact person. Angus Wilson is a name that means nothing to nobody.
Let me explain Angus Wilson. So he's I think he's about 30. Ex-national level quality A-grade rider. Racked it quite a few years ago. Still does some rides. He used to just bob his head into sort of an A-grade and just sort of hang on every now and again. So still kind of strong, isn't training as much, so wants a more relaxed fit, but can still ride fast. Okay, and
will get the benefit from the aerodynamic shaping, but he probably won't. He turns up to his corporate job on Monday and can't stand up at his seat. I think that person could be tempted to do this. Now,
I actually think this bike would be for me. I would ride this.
Well,
because I would come to, have quite an aggressive setup, but maybe next year you just go, all right, I'm coming up a few centimeters. Like, I would suit this, but I'm a niche. That's such a niche.
So just to let everyone know, Jesse's on antibiotics at the moment, so he's not really thinking straight. He's potentially lost a little bit of his intelligence. What the hell? You're 30 with a threshold of almost 400 watts. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but I want to come up a little higher. Don't want to ride as an aggressive position. I want to play with my bike fit, come up a bit, do a Chris Miller bike fit. This would do the job for me, wouldn't it?
You mean, yeah, I'm going to try and sell it to you because it potentially might slow you down a tiny bit. Unfortunately, you move into the category that is you're 10 kilometers too fast for this.
Why? It's got all the aero tube shaping.
I mean, yeah, it does come to it. Yes, it comes down to what position you be able to get yourself in. Yeah,
I think I want to come up a little higher, be a bit more relaxed, but still be strong, and I think it would fit.
Okay.
But how many of me are there? Like, for the average rider
And this
doesn't
is
suddenly just cling on to a 390 watt
Mate,
threshold.
I kind of what I like about this is I feel like it's a long-term play to. It's like the iPad. They're basically trying to recategorize a category away from, let's say the Defy is a really traditional-ish. No, that's probably not fair. But let's for the argument's sake here say that that's a traditional endurance bike setup that sits in below its pro peloton bike. At least this is trying to recategorize that as, you know what, Jesse, we'll give you a couple more centimeters up, but you get everything else. We'll give you everything else you wanted. So yeah, and with all the other brands basically just watering down their Madone or their Aero or whatever it might be to suck in a sort of more weekend warrior type rider. So you can buy the lower down spec'd Madone, and that's what the weekend warrior should get. Don't get the SL7 everything smarty pants bike. Get the three tiers down one. That's what you should get. That's the person potentially that could be sucked into this.
Okay. Yep. Now let's look at some prices and some specs here because I think it's interesting. So we've got the bike costs with Ultegra Di2 and Mavic wheels. It's £5,000. So what would that compare to? If you're going to buy a Trek Madone with Ultegra Di2, that's £6,000. You're going to buy the Canyon Aero with Ultegra Di2, again, £6,000. So it's about £1,000.
It's almost not fair
cheaper.
Comparing it to Canyon. They're just.
But what do you mean? Do you think that's expensive or cheap?
Oh, I just think Canyon, like their pricing so aggressive for what they deliver. Yeah, but anyway, for the argument's sake, yeah, do it.
And this is where, again, you start to raise eyebrows with the build. So it comes with Mavic Cosmic S42 wheels, which are 42 mil deep.
They're slop. Sorry.
They're almost 1,700 grams.
They're so
1660.
terrible.
They're only a 21 internal, which is just a bizarre spec given that they're selling this as an all-road bike. So
do you get other options
now
on wheel sets? Because those zip wheels are shit as well. Sorry.
Well, the problem is, with Ribble, when you go to buy it, you can then choose different bits. And so it allows you for £400 more to get zip 303s. Or for £1,800 more. No, you're not getting zip 353 NSWs. Right, so for £400 more, that's £5,400. You can get zip 303s, which would be better. At least they're 25 mil internal.
Ribble, can you start speccing your bikes with just DT Swiss, please?
No way. I was going to say,
No?
well, the DT Swiss is a 20 internal.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
those ones that
too.
come on the even the ones that come on the Aero are not good modern race wheels. They're like good race wheels from 5 years ago. I don't quite understand why Ribble can't do a Ribble branded their own in-house, because Ribble, they'll have, their factories could pump out some wider rims than that. I mean, come on, it's not that hard. I mean, I don't know what, they must be getting these OEM pricing from Mavic for like nothing. For Ribble not to be able to make their own in-house branded wheels that are wider, I find weird. Because these Mavics are just, you're not happy with those Mavics. They're not wide enough and they're too heavy.
Yeah, it seems strange that a brand like Ribble haven't just go to Hall 9 at Eurobike, bash out a set of, what do we want, 24 mil rim internals, 50 mil, put a little curve on there, happy days. Don't need carbon spokes, just a little proprietary hub, happy days. Just get whatever, maybe you just, like some crazy deal with Mavic, but I don't know. It's the only downside of the Ultra SLR as well. They spec them with those Mavic wheels. Yeah.
And so, I mean, those DT Swiss wheels that come on the Aero are also 100 grams lighter, and they're 50 mil deep versus 40 mil. So, again, for Ribble, and Ribble is not a frothy brand. So, £5,000, gonna have to upgrade the wheels. Now, I don't think the wheels on the Aero are amazing, but by the time you upgrade the wheels, you're kind of at the same price as the Aero anyway. And so, I don't think the pricing is for a Ribble is fantastic. It's kind of reasonable market rate, but it's not blowing me off with the pricing. So that's where it sits compared to some of the other competitors.
Is Ribble like Decathlon? Is it like a big bricks and mortar? Can you walk in and buy one of these? I do from memory, from my very brief. They don't have them in Ireland. I had them up north. Whether they were like that type of department store type.
They have
thing.
a few showrooms. I'm on their website. They have 4 showrooms across the UK.
Okay.
Lancashire, Kent, Bristol, and Birmingham.
Right, but they're still. It sounds like this. So you can go look at them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also think the color lets it down. So they do have their custom color thing, which you got to pay extra for. They've only got one default color, and that's this red and black, which isn't amazing. I think they could have done better with the color because I think the frame is unique looking. It looks cool. Kind of let down with the color. But overall, I am not quite negative coil Vitus territory. That was more because they gave that bike of the year, by the way. But so I'm kind of seeing what they're selling, and I get it, and I'm on board with this kind of hybrid geometry of slack at the front, modern at the rear, over the bottom bracket. So I'm with that. The weight seems okay, but you'd have to upgrade the wheels. So, I mean, I think kudos. It got me interested. I'm still not quite, I don't know, calling it all road and saying this is gravel capable, I think is a tough sell in gravel this in 2024. To me, this is just a very modern road bike with a modern for the people geometry. It's just a good racy, comfortable road bike, really. I mean, it does say all road, but I think that's I'm not convinced that's actually true.
For that sort of pricing, though, I mean, and the specs read quite well, but for that sort of pricing, you want something that's pretty well made here as well. And so that was kind of why I asked you about the is this a decathlon type thing? Because there's a certain premium that you would expect from that kind of price that's put itself in. And again, I can't make.
What do
that
you mean
call.
by well made? Like what would go wrong? Do you mean like the look and finish of the paint?
Yep. Yeah.
The build quality, and that's where I think the wheels don't really fit.
There is a look and feel to something that's. I mean, this is up against a Canyon Aero.
Essentially, yeah. When you pick through it, yeah.
And when you unbox one of those,
and it's also, by the way, it's up against the Trek Madone because the Trek Madone with Ultegra Di2 is 6,000 as well. With Bontrager wheels. The
finish of that paint, like it really does feel like just a real premium product. And so, yeah, we're looking at a few bloody internet snaps on it. It will need to stack up at that. That's also I asked about, can you go into the shop and ride it? Because I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because if it's just sort of there in a department store, does it sort of lose that, element potentially? If it's, up against a bike with a basket on the front. We haven't mentioned the e-bike though, Jesse.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool looking e-bike, wasn't it?
So just complete side issue, but I was asking for a friend about an e-bike. You probably know who the friend is who wants an e-bike, an e-road bike. And Luke wants an e-road bike.
Oh, right. Oh, cool.
Because he wants to start riding.
Oh, sick.
And he thought an e-bike would be the way to do it, but he wants the bike to look like a road bike. So, I totally get the theory of it. And I asked around to a couple of the distributors here in Australia. It's just completely not a thing here. Completely not a thing. E-road bike. So we have plenty of e-bikes, e-mountain bikes, e-commuters, all that kind of stuff. But the road bike that has the motor in it, that you can't really tell the difference. I think Cervelo launched one as well. Focus have got one. Those distributors don't even bother bringing into the country. There's just no market for it at all, which I don't know. I find quite interesting because in Europe it's a big thing. Maybe it's because they got big alpine climbs and that's a reason. But anecdotally, I've never ever seen one. So yeah.
That is, yeah, okay. That is interesting. Yeah.
Because it's pretty common for someone to, they want to go with Jesse and Chris on a weekend ride, but they only ride once a month. So they'll run the e-bike.
I could see that.
Yeah, but it doesn't happen, supposedly.
Okay.
And they're very expensive. It's the other kind of issue to it. So what do you reckon? The Ribble all-road bike, is it the new Vetus? Or are they on to something here? Let us know.
Chris, this next segment is sponsored by Favero Electronics with their Assioma Pro MX pedal. So firstly, thank you to Favero for sponsoring the show in this segment of the show. You've been running the Assioma Pro MX pedals for quite a few months now. So we're going to give an update and chat through how you've been using them with your off-road training and racing.
Yeah, so this is a follow-up. We did one actually prior to me do Gravel National. So I'll get into that particular race and how I used the pedals. But before I do that, I do just want to revisit a little bit of some of the unique features on these pedals that ultimately are the reason I decided to actually use them. So the first one, and we shouted this out the first time, which was the absence of the pod, Jesse Coyle. Podless solution. So ultimately, you have all the technology, so all the components, the rechargeable batteries, electronic components, the strain gauges, are safely housed inside the spindle to avoid dropout issues. Now, okay, so that basically means everything's gone inside the spindle. It also means there isn't a pod externally that will go out and get damage or anything along those sort of lines. So while I'm just sort of doing a couple more little specs that I've picked out on these, I just want you to have a quick look at those pedals that are on the Aspero there.
Yeah.
And have a sniff around.
Let's have a look.
So it's kind of a cliche thing to do, but the sort of, I really kicked the shit out of these pedals and I really tried to destroy. But I actually have done an attempt to try and be pretty harsh on these things. So hopefully Jesse picks out some scratches and bits and pieces. But yeah, we'll sort of go from there. The two other sort of spec things that ultimately I really like about these is they are very light. So they are, I think, 190 odd grams per pedal.
That's crazy. I can see here they're saying lightest off-road power pedals, 191.4 grams.
Super light. And it moves it into the category of component that, for a while there, adding a power meter to your bike did mean adding some form of weight. That is just not the case anymore. I was kind of tempted to take this down the route of the kind of accuracy chat. I'm well aware that, number one, we're not going to do that as well as some other YouTubers. Yep. And number two, it's kind of just a given with this product that they are super accurate. So when I say I did actually do it, so I was originally running these in conjunction with a single-sided Stages power meter, and it was very, very similar the whole kind of way. These were double-sided. The Stages were single-sided, so there's just going to be some differences in certain situations. These do come in a single-sided solution, so I'm not going to say that single-sided is dead. I ran it for a good period of time on the road, but obviously there's going to be a bit more data to use with the double-sided.
So how are you actually using them? You do a race, you've got, you buy the Assiomas, you install them on your gravel bike, your mountain bike, but it's a far less controlled situation. How are you actually getting use out of these? Obviously for training, that's a no-brainer, but in a race, are you looking at it?
But even in the training thing, so I want to get into this because I'm coming to this from the perspective as a metro gravel rider, right? Which I do think a lot of our audience are. And so by that, I mean, we're not Dylan Johnson. We're not going out and doing training sessions, interval sessions on the gravel. So really the question then becomes, why would you actually put power meter on your gravel when you aren't really training to power that much? And my answer is because on race day, it actually matters. And it matters more, I've found, in a gravel race. And I'm going to hold you up there. As a coach, you should be training on the bike you're intending to racing on. So that's probably something you're missing by not doing sessions on it. No. Well, I skipped over that because I do, as you know, I ride that bike a lot, but I don't do gravel intervals.
Okay. See what you mean.
That bike.
Okay.
I'll ride that bike most of the time in Centennial Park and do my effort. In fact, I find it a really useful bike to ride in, as you do, as a sort of training option. I kind of wanted to skip over that because the the actual race day scenario of having an accurate power meter. Now, I've heard people on YouTube rabbit on about how important it is to pace yourself in these events, right? Which is goes against everything I understand about a bike race. To me, it's you just go as fucking deep as you can and you hang on for as long as you can to stay with that front group, all right? And so that was my sort of road mentality. But in a gravel race, it blows apart so quickly, and there are obviously riders of much different ability that goes out the window, and you do become in this pacing yourself scenario. So what I want to talk about is just in that gravel nationals race, first climb was so basically 3 climbs in this particular event, and then a long false flat downhill section. So my game plan was always going to be I wanted to crest that third climb with a group that was either above my ability or would take me to the finish line. That was always my plan. Everything that happened before that, I was willing to tinker with the actual pacing myself. First climb was just balls out, I'm not going to lie. That was just do what you can, get up over that, down the descent. From there on, the second climb was really, really important. This is where I used the pedals because it was more of a graded road-styled climb, and it was in that scenario that I knew I wanted to ride at a certain power, like a sub-threshold power, because it was going to be a 40-minute climb, and I was going to stick to that power number, and essentially went to the front of my group that I was in, and I rode that number, knowing that if I did that and I would come to the third climb in good condition, I would be able to hopefully bridge to that group in front, which is exactly how the actual event played out. Got to the top of that climb, was of course dropped on the descent, but on that last climb, managed to then bridge myself across to the group in front, which featured some of the guys from the elite group and ultimately my rival in my age group, and that allowed me then to get on the podium in my first gravel nationals.
Okay. Now, you've got the Assioma MXs on, so you know it's accurate. But you're off-road, so you're on dirt, gravel. What are you actually looking at on the screen to help see that? Because if you're just looking at the instantaneous power, even if it's accurate, it'd still be jumping around all over the place.
Yeah.
What fields are you looking at?
Yeah, good question. So I would normally use an instantaneous power on the road. That's sort of either that or 3 second power smoothing. I moved that out to 10 seconds on that in that particular situation for exactly the reason you just said. Now that second climb was actually more of a steady gradient where you could get a sense of your effort pretty consistently, and that was backed up in the power. But you're dead right. Like the amount of surging and squeezing over just little rocks and things like that, you do need some sort of smoothing.
I think even anything up to about 30-second smoothing can still be useful. Even have a few. Have 3 second and 30-second, or 10-second and 30-second smoothed average. It just helps. Otherwise, you're constantly looking down. The numbers going all over the place and you're freaking out. It's just crazy as well how far the pedals and just power meters and gel have come. I mean, the installation, it's just, you screw them in.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep.
You'd probably want to do a calibration through the head unit initially, but then it just has auto calibration. I mean, the days of torque wrenching, measuring the angle of how they're installed, to keep that data accuracy, having to stop and do the zero offset calibration in the head unit every half an hour. It's like people won't even remember those days, but something like this is just how easy it is, and then still be accurate is nuts.
And taking that how easy it is to the support level. I don't know if you've ever had to deal with them, but it's a situation where they're able to drag everything from the app. So you essentially use your app, you go through the app and notify that there's troubleshooting, and it essentially sends all the metrics that they need, and they're able to then return and push that back out to the pedal and basically work out what's right or what's wrong with your pedals just through that entire protocol.
It's like when you go to the Apple store and they're doing all these diagnostics and you're like, what is all this stuff?
It's quite frightening.
No. Okay, sick.
So yeah, that's the Assioma Pro MX2s. Obviously, guys, we'll put some links down below. So the pricing on those, I'll give those in Australian dollars. So the dual-sided, which I've been running, are at $1,177. The single-sided is $769. I'll continue to run them, continue to train them on them. I've got one more big gravel race, which we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks coming up. So, yeah, big thanks to Assioma or Favero for supporting today's episode.
Chris, this question popped up on a Reddit subreddit. A Reddit subreddit.
Jesus.
there's some lingo the kids use. About training. And it says, how to manage late season when you've hit your racing goals. This is because in the Northern Hemisphere,
they have seasons?
Season's starting to perhaps wind up. The local racing series ends. Group rides may be still running, but the attendance drops. Couple more weeks left. September, October, things start to wind down. And so this person's kind of asking, season's over, still motivated, I've hit my goals. What can I do? I'm not quite ready to fully drop into winter training. It's way too early to start training for next season, doing my base training. How can I make use of the next few months? So they said, if you had a month or so to spare to solidify your improvement/gains going into next season, what would you do? How would you best spend your time? He says, they say my initial thoughts were, in September, do a VO2 block and 3 to 4 training races in a new category. They've moved up the category, which is cool. So they're going to do some VO2 max work, try their next category up in September. October, fun rides, no structure, maybe a cross race. And then November, have a break, start doing their weightlifting and the base training. And then December, start the base training seasons. That's what they've proposed. But yeah, I just want to chat through what are all the different things you can do in this kind of awkward part of the season? What else can they try? What other things could they get out of it?
So as a lot of that comes down to actually how successful your year's been as well. So there is that sort of, are you happy to kind of rest on your laurels and go from there, or are you still scratching for improvement and results? Well, it sounds like this particular person has had a pretty successful year by the sounds of it, by moving up grades and things like that. Look, my kind of thing would be just double down, go hard,
keep going. Yes,
keep going.
Yeah. Stretch the season out.
Stretch the season. Yep. Yes, worst case you could overreach and go down that route, but my thing would be stretch it out, but also do that with focusing on maybe not necessarily putting weight on, but increasing your fueling. Anytime I find myself really starting to drift towards overreaching, overtraining, a lot of the times I've found that I can actually just almost overcome that by upping my fueling and upping, especially on the bike and pre and post riding. So, yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. It's that you're kind of watching the Vuelta and you're like, it kind of almost has that sense about it as well, that it's like, yeah, last saloon.
Okay, so that's one option. You don't worry that you've ticked your goals. I mean, you keep trucking, keep picking some other goals, training goals, race goals.
You're only as good as your last ride, mate. Right? You're only as good as the other results have been forgotten.
Yep, send it straight through to October. Yep. That is one very, sure. As long as you're mentally not going to totally fizzle out, you're good to do that. Now, I'm going to run through a whole bit. I've listed a whole bunch of different things you could try. Kind of similar to that, but a bit different, is to put in a whole other training cycle. I'm talking a full-on base, build, peak, condensed into a whole nother block in between the end of the season now, which is sort of end of August, and before you start training for the 2025 season. And so this works with some riders that don't need to follow such a strict seasonal schedule. So pros, obviously, their season might be 5, 6, 7 months. And so they're not going to go and cram some random training block in November because it totally risks throwing out their next season. But for most of us who, most of our events are going to be somewhere in summer, but we don't need to be firing from April to September. And we can kind of work things more towards how we want them. And then, maybe we've got a couple of events to peak for next year, which we can fit in. I think it works for this. And so the point of this is you still take a break. So you get to now, you've ticked your season goals. It's end of August. Cool. Have a break. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Let the CTL drop. Maybe you still ride for fun. You freshen up. You relax. But then instead of doing some awkward kind of winter thing to just stretch your way till December and then start some gigantic base training, like 4-month general endurance phase, which most people probably don't need if they're not doing that super long pro style season. You just basically fit in a whole condensed 12 or 16 week training cycle all before you start building for next season. And so I find it works for less experienced riders as well, because there's a kind of a compounding effect mentally going through a building phase of training, where you're kind of you're learning lessons along the way. If you've only ever done that maybe once or twice, so going through that whole process again, even in a condensed period of time, you'll learn some lessons along the way. So then when you repeat that stretched out for your proper 2025 season, you'll be in an advantage. And also physically as well, a lot of less experienced riders, they're not building such a huge amount of chronic fatigue that they need that huge break. So generally 1 or 2 weeks, freshen up, then rebuild through. You go 3 months again, rest, freshen up, and then you can do your proper 2025 season, and you're benefiting from all the fitness that you've built through that mini phase. And so let's say you take a break now, end of August. Then you might do a month general endurance, so condense that right down. Maybe 2 4-week build cycles, so that's another 8 weeks. That takes you to 12 weeks. Pick. There's probably not going to be any events or races in December because it's the middle of winter if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. But maybe you have a training target. And this is where you can maybe also train for something different. If you're always training for a 5-hour gravel event, let's say in season, put in a Zwift. I'm training to PB Box Hill on Zwift. Well, it's just something that you usually wouldn't train for. So you're running through a phase of training around something that is different and which you'll learn a lot from and target different energy systems specifically, and run through that. Do your testing and that in December, and then you have your actual break, Christmas, New Year's, you relax, and then you can hit the ground running in January, and you still got plenty of time. You can still do a full 3 months endurance base training leading into sort of March, April, and you have a really good season next year, but you've had that whole cycle repeated in. So I don't think people need to just be like, this season's ended, I now have 6 months of basically nothing doing endurance training and strength training until then it's April next year and I can start ramping up again. I do think it's unnecessary for a lot of riders. For pros, yes. For Cat 1s, elite riders, yes. So that's something to consider. And if you've got a coach, they can put that in. If you're on one of these online training plans, a lot of them have 12, 16-week full training cycles, and you can just select one of them and run through. And mentally, you got to be careful. You don't want to. You're already kind of on your last legs towards the end of the season. Don't do this. But if you're still feeling quite energized, it's something you can try.
Do people still do the big endurance build phases in winter? Christ, that must be boring. Yeah, wow. Okay. I suppose. I
think for a lot of people that they need that works really well. I do think though for a lot of other people, it's kind of 6 months because it's almost for a lot of people it might be from now until April, and that's like 6 months of. Not that you're not progressing, because you can, if you're really consistent, you're doing your strength training, you're keeping your volume up, you're doing enough intensity, you can still progress. But are you going to be any worse off if you actually just run through another full build cycle within there, saying you're giving yourself plenty of rest? I reckon for most people that aren't really experienced and have to run through a season, they'll be better off doing what I just said and almost running through a mini cycle.
And I just would have thought mentally that's so much more achievable and fun, and you might see benefits at it just because, okay, we don't have much of a winter here, but for what it's worth, I can think of nothing worse if I see in my training calendar in July 3, I've got 3 hours of endurance. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And I do this constantly where I look at the TSS number that's prescribed in the endurance ride and I go, right, it's the fastest way for me to hit that TSS number. I'm really bad for it. Because, I just spending long time outright, because it's just I know people say, oh, just go for an endurance ride. But when you do an endurance ride properly, it's really, really, I think it affects your day more than anything else because it has that way of sapping all your energy from you. Whereas even a VO2 session I find myself quite energized after that. So, yeah, I don't know. I just to then think to myself, I'm going to do 8 weeks of zone 2, no chance.
8 weeks would be quick. I mean, a lot of these, I mean, if you look at this rider here that posted this thing, they're basically doing that from November. That's when they've said, I'm going to start doing my base training and lifting weights. They're not going to be doing anything until April. So they're only probably going to start building up around March. So that's at least 3 months. And that's kind of what I'm saying. I think a lot of people would actually be better off filling that in. It's probably going to be a lot indoors, but that's why you pick an indoor goal and just do what we talked about on the podcast last week. Just go head into the indoor thing if you want. Train for something different. This person did say they're going to do a VO2 block for a month in September while they train for those races. Take a break, do September, October, run through that, and then take a break November.
I suppose it also depends on what your actual racing goals were. Like if they were Leadville and, these multi-hour events, then I can see that the focus to these big endurance blocks would be, okay, well, I can see the trade-off to this. Whereas for me, like my state championship race was 2 hours. Like, yes, there's going to be some benefit to my endurance, obviously, but it's not as tangible for someone like me. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Other goals. Other things you could do. Gain weight. If deemed necessary or beneficial, if you think you're a bit scrawny, you always thought, oh, geez, if I put on a few kilos of muscle, I would benefit from that. And so you can really go head first into this where you just cut your riding back. I'm only riding 3 times a week. You usually ride 6. If you ride 4 or 5 times a week, you only ride 2. And you do 2, even if it's in winter, maybe 3 strength sessions a week. And try and pack on muscle, get the muscle fiber type conversion of those fast twitch fibers into the more fatigue resistant fibers. They had this on here because they said November 2-week break, then start lifting and base. But you could even take that a step further. If you're like quite underweight and you feel like you could really benefit from 3 or 4 kilos. I think the problem with this is a lot of people try and do it too quick. So they go, all right, it's winter. I'm starting strength training. A month later, they're then into their big endurance training, base training phase. I think if you're going to do this and you really want to put on weight, you need to stick this for longer. This needs to be 3 months minimum. Because remember, if you're only doing strength training 2 times a week, a month, that's only 8 strength sessions. You're not putting on a kilo of muscle with 8 gym sessions. And so I'd say if this person thought that was beneficial, start that in October. Don't really worry about your riding until January. Give yourself October, November, December, at least 3 months to really commit to it. I generally find your weight will pick up quite a lot when you start doing it. A lot of that's just inflammation because your muscles are literally damaged. And so you'll have a lot of fluid retention. The actual muscle mass takes longer. And so if you do think you want to gain some weight, give yourself all of winter, like commit to it. And you will feel like you've thrown your fitness out the window. But over time, when you then start to build back after January, it'll come back. And then you'll also have that benefit of the muscle mass.
I don't like too much of the anecdotal stuff in this because obviously everyone's different. But can I just, like my own circumstance with that, it's taken longer. And I certainly didn't do it right in the beginning because I almost tried to maintain the same riding I would do, like 10, 15 hours a week on the bike with 2 strength sessions a week. And like you said, initially there was a bump in weight, but the actual performance of me in the gym pretty much just plateaued for the best part of, 12 months because ultimately I was just always training fatigued when it came to any kind of strength stuff. So having to dial back the riding and focusing actually on explosive stuff in the gym to me was another really beneficial thing. So movement-based stuff. Obviously, the Olympic lifting is still plays a role in it. But
what do you mean, like box jumps?
Box jumps, weighted box jumps, weighted lunge type stuff, variations of that. Yeah, all those kind of power cleans, all these sort of dynamic lifts have. I put an Instagram post up on during the week about it. They are the least cool thing to do in the gym, but they're easily from my own personal feeling as someone who's over 40, it certainly helped me a lot. But just coming back to the load that you do carry when you are doing strength training, do not underestimate that it still actually needs to be fueled, especially if you're trying to, and a lot of us try and do it as part of a double day, where you might do an endurance ride in the morning, maybe just an hour or something like that, but then you go to the gym and you just take some water with you or something. Trust me, that will kill you. You do need to, you'll like, I take my sugar water into the gym with me.
In winter, probably less of an issue because you're probably going to be able to do them on separate days if you're cutting your riding frequency. If this is like, I'm trying to build muscle over the next 4 months. So, but yeah, still feel that, definitely.
And it's weird, once you do put muscle on, like how do I put this? But like, you might not fit into your bib shorts anymore. That happens. Yep. And you have to decide whether that's something that you want or it's not. Yeah. So you might be changing like I did. You have to change your wardrobe. And you've just got to accept it. All right? Yeah.
So that's good. That's something you can focus on if you want for that period. Now, other thing you can do, total opposite, is lose weight. Essentially the total opposite. Again, you need to figure out if this is going to be beneficial to you. I've done this in the past and it's been beneficial for me. For years, from like 2015 to 2020, I always raced at 76, 77 kilos. It was just it was always my weight. And then the first time I ever managed to get my race weight down to kind of 73, 74 was after one of those COVID, I think it was 2021, where nothing was really going on. And I was still riding, but not training a lot. I was probably riding like 3-4 days a week. And I was just like, all right, this is my time to go from 76. I think I'll get down to about 72. And it was basically a side goal of I'm just going to cut calories back more than I normally would and take this time to have the weight drop off. And then when I came back to training, came back up a little bit, but then I was kind of sitting at about 75. And then it allowed me in future seasons when I was trying to get down my race weight, I could then have a race weight of 73, 74. But I do credit a lot of that to that sort of, how long was it? Maybe 4 months again, where I lost a lot of weight and I would have lost a lot of muscle mass at that period of time. And for me, given that I had always carried more muscle and was always a bigger rider, that benefited my riding. And I also wasn't trying to cram in a heap of training at that time too. So yeah, my fitness dropped down then too, but I was kind of accepting that it wasn't a period where I was racing. And so I'm not saying everyone should do this, but if you've always been sitting higher than you need to and you've just never really focused on losing weight, I do think that end of season, start of the next season, it can work to drop some of that weight when you're not training as much. So that is another option. I think you did the same, Chris. It didn't really work for you. So you're sitting there quite silently like, please be careful.
I'm sure, yeah, I've spoken about
yes,
this.
Yeah.
I don't need to
Chris did. I think Chris did a video on that too.
It was literally the same thing and tanked my entire body.
Yeah. And so some people you might want to gain, but either specifically gaining or basically just playing around with your weight where you normally would just, in the season, you sit at the same weight, assess that. You need to. It could be a good time to focus on that. Another one, do your sprint training. This is another one where it's almost similar to strength training in that it's one of those things that you might not do a lot of. And then when you do a sprint training block and you hit that sprint PB that you just never could hit, and suddenly you'll always be able to hit that. It's just that breakthrough you need. You can never do 1,000 watts. You're always doing 900. You train it. You go out, you do 2 sprint sessions a week. You're hitting it. You're doing long sprints, short sprints, overgeared sprints, seated sprints. Hit it. You just managed to crack 1,000 watts, and you'll do 1,000. You'll always be able to do 1,000 watts most of the time for the next 3 years. because it's just about being able to get that activation and the power to be able to do it. And generally the body's pretty good at hanging on to it. And it's just something most of us don't have time to do when we're actually training, and that winter time can be nice for that.
Such an underrated block, 100%. Just from the sprint thing, but also, I actually think it helps your riding a bit, just in terms of your skill on the bike. Like once you're putting 1200 watts or whatever it might be out on the bike in a sprint, it really sort of pushes the envelope of your equipment and your own physiology. I think you learn a little bit about your own bike handling in those kind of short, sharp moments.
Agree there. So how long for? Again, this isn't a month. This, just going back to this thread, and I'll send you a screenshot. We need to stop blocking stuff just a month and flip-flopping around. So if you want to do a sprint training, I'd say, okay, October, they're having their break, post-season break. That's cool. Go November and December sprint training. Don't worry about your base training. People get freak out this base training. It's all right. You've got time. You can do that. Start that in January. November, December, go and build your sprint. 2 sprint sessions a week. 1 or 2 other, 1 intense session outside of that. 1 endurance ride, 4 rides a week. You're good. You'll still be good in January, and your sprint will be higher. Other thing as well, if you're being a bit of a training addict, is just step back from riding. And not for a month. Step back for 3 months. So, but do it by forcing your days off. And so if you're someone that's usually, I train 6 days a week and have 1 day off, force yourself and put in the 3 days a week that you're going to take off and go find something else to do with those days. So you're not going to lose fitness because you'll still be riding 4 days a week, but you've got 3 other days in the week where you can go and do anything for 3 months. Your fitness won't change. Your fitness will come down, but you're not going to totally fall to hell in a handbasket. You can pick it back up in January. You'll either come back in January super motivated and ready to fire, just desperate to go again, or maybe you'll realize that you are riding too much and life has way more to offer, and you're going to stick with your 4 days a week, and you go and do yachting or hiking, or you get into gaming. I don't know, whatever the hell, gardening, whatever it is. I do think, and I see it sometimes with people I coach and just myself and you as well, just people we know, is you just get stuck training a lot, and it's hard to switch that off. And so the end of the season, where you're not worried about next season, just force yourself to dial it back. See what else you want to do. Maybe you've forgotten what it feels like to have a crap load of energy and be running around, climbing the walls with energy. And sometimes that takes more than a few weeks to come back. And so that can also be good. If you find someone, if you do honestly feel like you might be a bit exercise addicted, force yourself the days off. That's another option as well. I will say, after having said all that, you've got big goals. If you're listening to this and you're a really good elite rider, you've got big goals, get cranking the hours. Because if you want to have a 6 watt per kilo threshold and win domestic races, everything we just said is well and good, but you got work to do. So just a reminder, if you want to be really strong, you're probably still going to need to be cranking you've at least your 12 to 14 hours a week plus strength training all winter. So
that was kind of where my head was at.
And get to work. Yeah.
Like it's kind of easy to do that. Oh, just chill out, everyone. You don't need to. But there's also, that other person whose goals are a lot loftier and a lot higher. And for that person, go nuts. Yep. Like rip in, as far as I'm concerned. Crank the hours. All right, subscriber question.
Yes.
Subscriber question.
More bike chat.
Monthly, yeah.
This is good.
This is a hefty equipment chat today.
Yep.
All right, so new bike question. I am looking at getting a new race bike. I am 37 with a 4 watts per kilo and very flexible, but 6'3". What are you? I mainly race TTs and then go KOM hunting. But as I'm in the UK, the TT scene, especially for road bikes, is pretty good. Yeah, it is. Okay. I am looking at either a new Dogma F, size 57.5 with a slammed 120 stems, 36 bars, or the new Gen 2 Ostro VAM, 58 slam 120 stems 36 bars. I have some 55-60 wheels, which I will use already, and have the 1x SRAM red build. Really appreciate yours and Jesse's opinion. I have a very aero position and tend to lose time in cornering, descending, or losing a watt or two in the frame for one that handles a lot better would actually make me faster. Also, there are lots of punchy hills around me, so I want a fast bike up and down.
Okay. This is a interesting two options he's given. So do you get the Factor Ostro VAM, the new version, or a Dogma F? Interesting. Okay, so now you've got the obvious things that you're going to compare. What's the weight? What's the aerodynamics? Blah blah blah. Okay. What else? If you're assessing between two bikes, now the person said that they're going to run the 120 stem slammed on both with 36 bars. So I'm guessing that they've done the geometry comparison, stack and reach, so they know that the bike fit is going to fit them in both cases, given that they've been quite specific with that. So we'll take that out of the play. What else are you sort of considering then? I do think tire clearance. Now I haven't looked this up, but that's something I would be looking into. What is the tire clearance between the two frames? Whichever one has the widest tire clearance to future-proof yourself would be a box for that bike. So consider the tire clearance. I'm pretty sure most of these won't have any issue fitting a 32. So you're probably going to be covered just for your general road racing setup, because most people are running 32s max. But something to consider.
Bringing his own wheels to the equation as well. So maybe a generation or two old. So you could be looking at slightly a narrower setup with those wheels. But let's assume we're probably on around a 28 or a 30, I would argue.
Actually, I'm not going to skip over the speed thing, because I am pretty sure the Factor Ostro VAM tests faster than the Dogma F. And so if you are really nitpicking just on aerodynamics, I do think the Factor has a more modern design. It's been more aero tweaks, narrower head tube, better transition through the fork in the head tube.
I don't think that's up for debate. That's a Nero Show fact as far as I'm concerned. And the Factor comes with Aero bottles. Just throw that into the equation.
Although the Dogma does have the sculptured down tube to fit a round bottle, so there's that. But if you're doing a road bike time trial on some UK motorway at 60 kilometers an hour, I'm pretty sure the Factor is going to be faster. Also pretty sure the Factor is going to be lighter. That Factor Ostro VAM frame, pretty sure is lighter than a Dogma. This is also just a Nero Show uncertified fact. I'm pretty sure the Factor is more comfortable. That Dogma, from word on the street, is that it is very stiff. And so like sprinting torsional stiffness, it may feel stiffer than the Dogma, which you may like. It may feel stiffer than the Factor. Is that actually making you faster? Maybe not. I just think that the actual comfort of it, Factor is just more modern. And I do feel like the Dogma is just a stiffer ride. So comfort-wise, you're probably going to be better on the Factor.
The comment here, I have a very aero position and tend to lose time in cornering descending. So losing a watt or two on the frame for one that handles a lot better would make me faster.
Is that where you're looking at wheelbase, head tube angle, and those? So from my limit, I'm not a bike fitter, but he would want the more stable, a less aggressive, less twitchy platform for more descending stability? Or does he want the twitchier, more responsive to input handling bike? What's your opinion there?
That depends what his deficiencies are. Because as someone who, now I'm not sure whether he's saying he's not a confident descender, because if he's not confident, you want a more planted bike and something that instills confidence in you to go faster.
That sounds like my interpretation of his question is he wants more confidence.
He wants more confidence. Yeah. So then you can be looking at things like wheelbase, et cetera. But then I kind of argue that the position that he's actually putting himself in, that quite aggressive position, will ultimately be less helpful when it comes to being confident and planted, because he'll find his weight is too far forward, and if he's running narrow bars and this type of thing.
But let's assume the actual bike fit's the same between the bikes, because it sounds like his bike fit's dialed. It's just same bike fit between the two frames. What's going to give him more confidence?
Don't know the answer to that. Again, something like that, I think that's where your tires and your tire width and I hate to say it, but practice and actual skill on the road is going to give you a lot more than the 1 or 2 watts that we might be able to find him in the difference between a Factor and a Pinarello. And then the comment about the punchy hills. Again, this is another one where you can kind of take this 2 ways, because you're right. The Dogma has that word on the street about being super stiff, react like just an absolute, every single watt you put in, all those rhetorics that you hear from people, which, by the sounds of it, will be a really, really good way of getting up these punchy hills that he's talking about. But the flip side of that is that the Factor is going to be lighter. So then you're in a circumstance where, that bike might not be as absolutely stiff as the Dogma, but it's maybe a couple of 100 grams lighter. So therefore you're getting over those punchy climbs. Comes down to almost the way that he wants to ride those hills. What's the trail show? Yeah,
so in terms of the actual bike fit, the stack and reach are basically the same. Just the trail on the Factor Ostro VAM is 58.6. The trail on the Dogma F is 55, which means for this, the commenter who says they struggle with descending. Now, this is a bit subjective, but my interpretation is if you're struggling with descending and you're losing time in corners, it means you're probably not as confident to send it. And so you want a bike that isn't as twitchy and is a little bit more stable. And more trail is going to get you there. And so put this rider on a Dogma and the Ostro, send them downhill. They're going to feel more planted on the Ostro. And therefore, I'm probably going to say that might make them more confident descending. Whereas the Dogma, if you're Chris Miller, is sick. You're fully ripping it into every corner. But it's probably going to make you pretty nervous if you're not as confident. That's my interpretation of those numbers. I'm not an expert on bike geometry and the input that has, but that's kind of how I'm reading into it. So
I'd caveat that by just saying that that's really operating in the weeds when it comes to improving your time going down a hill in comparison to all the other things you can do to improve your descending, even equipment-wise, like I mentioned, tires and even wheels, like carbon spoke wheels are kind of challenge descending, especially on rough roads.
Okay. And so in absence of being able to test ride both of these bikes, I mean, if you're buying a Dogma and an Ostro, you should really be trying to test ride these things. Like there'll be shops that'll let you test ride a Dogma. I mean, imagine buying a $20,000 car and not being able to test drive it. I mean, you should be able to test ride these because that's the best way you're going to compare. But just if we're just doing a specs sheet read, Nero Show style, I'm saying pick the Factor Ostro VAM. Can't really see any reason to pick the Pinarello other than it just if you really like the look of it, which would be fair.
I feel like this is a momentous moment.
And I'm not even a Factor. Factor doesn't really do anything for me. It's just, I think it's a better bike for him.
I'm about to say, pick the Factor over the Dogma. I don't feel happy saying that. It's just where my head is at in August 2024.
How did you find the Factor handled? descending wise?
Yeah, really well, actually. Really well. I caveat slightly by saying it was the first like premium disc brake bike I ever rode. So it was a improvement on the Duvel. I don't mean to be rude to the Duvel, but so it was kind of mind-blowing at the time for me. But yeah, I'm a bit lost now as to where it would sit. But and we've said in the past that that bar and stem on that original Ostro VAM being as kind of loose as it was, or not stiff as it was, didn't instill confidence to go downhill. Yeah, but
which they've since updated.
Which they've since updated, and the bike looks so sick. Have you seen some of the color designs on the Factor website at the moment? They've got all these like collab ones. It's just if you could, like they've just
still
nailed it.
I still don't think the silhouette of the frame looks nice. But
no, but yeah, I don't argue that. But front on the bike is without par. I think that like anyway, we've talked about that head tube in the past. But look at these colorways. Which one? I'll have all of them. The Ostro VAM HPM Maze Whelan edition. Oh, it's some cool artist I've never heard of. The 2024 1900 edition. What's that, like sort of an Olympics theme? And I've seen the other one. I've seen that the standard Ostro VAM, but with that, like, what are we calling that? Like a glitch colorway potentially on it. I've seen that in the flesh. It's just so good. The paint jobs, they've absolutely nailed them. I gotta say. Yeah. And the wheels, are the wheels hookless? I don't think those black ink wheels are hookless. No, they're not. They're not hookless. So they've carbon spokes, 50mm rim depth, 1,200 grams. Nice. Tell you what, old mate, buy the Dogma and send us the Factor. Well, actually, it's your size, I think.
I reckon I could fit a 58.
I reckon you could.
I slam it. Yep.
All right. I'm not shitting on Run Club. That's not why I bring this up.
You're more obsessed with Run Club people than actual people that do Run Club.
I am obsessed. I am absolutely obsessed. Because after one of our chats on this, I went and followed a few Run Clubs.
I'm on. You sent me one
because they're local, now. Right? And they're
she's in CP.
They're running around Centennial Park, and that's how I stalked these people. I found where they did their Run Clubs, found them on Strava, and then TikTok and Instagram, the algorithm did its thing and sent me all these people doing them. And I'm following their kind of Run Clubby journey, and I find it's a little bit like the Sydney vlogger scene. It's like this insight into these people doing a sport. But I think they've all lost the plot, Jesse. Now, okay. Firstly, let me just say, if you're doing Run Club to meet hot chicks and hot blokes, go nuts. That's your thing. Ditch cycling now. Go to Run Club. Do it. No, I'm sorry. It's just done. That's where you go. All right. So if that's your thing, then do that. But if you're actually doing it because you're into this like leisure activity that's also giving you fitness, which is now also giving you like this competitive thing, let's talk about cycling. All right, because City Marathon's coming up, so most of the clubbers have just done the City to Surf, right, which is like a fun run here in Sydney. Now you've got the City Marathons in 3 weeks. Okay, all the run clubbers are fucking injured. They're all absolutely shat on with they've all got shin splints or calf strains or toe blisters or like ingrown things in their feet, and it's got to the point like. So they post about this stuff as it's just standard practice that as a person, and they run like, they're not taking the piss. They're running like 20, 30 Ks a week. So of course they're going to get bloody injured. And so I'm not going to, but she's at the physio twice a week. Then she then gets acupuncture another day a week. And then she's got a coach. So most of them are all coached. And it's like, okay, she's just like, these are the boxes that you've got to tick now to do Run Club, are all these sort of anti-inflammatory sort of pastimes to try and get you through. So if you're actually at this level and you're running this much, Maybe this is a sales pitch to them to try cycling. Because trust me, what's 20 hours a week running? That's going to be 10 hours? Is that 10 hours a week? Probably training? Maybe. Let's say it is. Let's say that's 10 hours a week training. You can do 10 hours a week of another fitness sport, and trust me, you're not going to get shin sprints. You're not going to get acupuncture. You might get a sore bum for a little bit, but that'll go away, and then you'll be fine. So this is my pitch to run clubbers. Can you please consider, once you've done the Sydney Marathon, putting Lycra on and joining us, going round and round in circles at Centennial Park. I just don't want people to think that it's normal to have to go and do all this other auxiliary maintenance.
Cycling is just so much harder to get into. You need so much more stuff. The whole pedal thing is such a turn-off because they know it looks weird to ride around in joggers, which fine, you do to get started. No one actually cares. But you're going to want to fit in, so you're going to want to run cleats. And then that's a whole thing that I think is a massive blocker to people, is people just, it's scary to try out clipless pedals for the first time. You got to buy a bike, kit, it's expensive if you want the brand stuff, which if you're a run clubber coming, you're not running the cheap stuff. Like you're going to want, like these people are going to want the brand stuff. And if you're used to paying running prices, wait till you see cycling prices.
Why are you so negative, Jesse?
Traffic.
Oh, God.
Hell. I can see why they just stick to running, to be honest.
Yes. And let's be honest, we don't look very cool. Like, really. I mean, only cyclists think cyclists are cool.
Especially in the cafe situation. When you rock up to a cafe and you've got a group of run club people versus the Lycra people, and we're like clip-clapping all over the place.
Like, I just turn around and get out of there.
It's just done. But
it's embarrassing.
They can't keep up. Yeah. So, and the other thing as well, a lot of the clubs for cycling is just not old people, like relatively old people. There's not that many clubs with heaps of under 25s. It's generally 25 is like you're the young kid in the club, and it's a lot of 30 minimum, more kind of 40 to 55s, at least in Sydney and a lot of the clubs in the groups and stuff. There's not these groups of the 18 to 23-year-olds, which is all the run club people. And so they're not going to want to go and join a Sydney Uni Velo club ride with a bunch of 45-year-olds.
These run clubs actually just came out of nowhere. And they just were hot people that all suddenly started running around together.
That's the ones that are in your algorithm. Most of them aren't like 9 out of 10s.
Okay, fair enough. But the 6s are only turning up because the 9s are there. That's how this works. And why can't that just be the same with cycling? Like,
I mean, look, it should be. It should.
The gateway is potentially.
Look, it's much more sustainable. You're not going to get injured.
That's my point. That was 100%. All my point was. Yeah.
And there's more. Like, it's more. I reckon it's more fun. It's more culture.
Yeah.
But I can see why it's going to take a while to filter in, because
it just needs a few more of these influencers to get shin splints and have issues, and they go, shit, what am I going to do with my Saturday mornings now? Oh, what are these people doing? That's all.
Okay.
I'm just putting the offer out there that we're here. And then we'll tear you down for once you do get here for wearing the wrong thing and doing all that sort of stuff.
And not having an aero bike. Having external cables.
Who'd buy an all-road bike?
Having a black helmet.
Yeah. All right. I reckon that's us done.
Yep.
All right.
So.
We'll see you next week.
See you then.